All right, we'll get this show on the road. So hope you're all having a great day today. We've got the landfill session starting now. We've got 4 great presenters. The first one that'll be leading us off is Chris Purchas, across from New Zealand. He's from Tonkin Taylor, one of the senior consultants. So Chris will be presenting on should councils run landfills, a really interesting question. So thanks, Chris. Let's give him a warm welcome.
Cool, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to present today. Before I kick into the presentation, I just want to acknowledge Carolyn Turnbull in particular, who had the original idea for this, who's based in our Melbourne office, and her and I and another woman by the name of Kimberly Hope, who works for a local, or did work for a local government, now works for us in New Zealand, worked really hard on this together. So I get to do the talking, but they've also done a lot of hard work on this. And I guess the genesis for this presentation has been our work with a number of local governments, considering a range of options for waste and resource recovery. In particular, historically, local governments have owned landfills and continue to do so in many parts of the country. So the question I guess I want to discuss a little bit is that a good idea? And really, the answer is it depends. Wouldn't want to give you a definitive answer. So there are over 1,000 municipal waste landfills operating in Australia. Over 70% of those are owned by local governments. But on the other hand, over 75% of the waste generated in Australia ends up in approximately 80 major landfills, meaning the remaining council-owned sites are pretty tiny, basically. Low annual tonnage and often very remote. So I'm probably not telling you anything that this creates some challenges for councils seeking to maintain and operate a viable scale of operation. So that's really what we're going to play around with. That's gone to the same place, yep. So I guess, again, if you're here, you're probably aware of the fact that planning for landfills and future disposal requirements feels a whole lot more complex than it did a wee while ago. So this is true for major sites, obviously, but even for smaller sites. And if I think to probably 20 years ago when I first started to do work here in Australia, you didn't need to go that far out of the metro centres to find sites that were largely unregulated, and it's certainly a very, very different picture now. So we've listed a few of the key issues there. Obviously, it's getting more expensive to build things and operate things. We've got increasing compliance requirements. You're needing to access a whole lot of specialist expertise, either employing that in or using consultants or other specialists. And there's a real risk that if you don't get that expertise on board, that you can get contract cost blowouts, you can get incorrect operations that means you actually create a whole lot of risk on your sites, or you might not have a really good understanding of what the full costs of operating your sites might be. If you're operating in or close to a metropolitan area, then you might actually be competing for market share, and that might be on the basis of price, but there might be things like quality of service that are driving things as well. So it's pretty important to take all of those things into account when you're deciding what do we think we should actually do. So from a council perspective, it's really obviously many of you will be thinking about is this ownership model sustainable? So you've got pressure from your communities to provide a cost-effective waste disposal solution that is viable in the long term. And then you've got some costs and reputational risks associated with that. So it ain't simple. There's a whole lot of things that need to be considered. So I've got a few slides that kind of walk us through that. And then I've actually got a couple of case studies that will hopefully illustrate a little bit of the thinking that we've been able to get involved with a couple of clients. So if you are operating your own site, probably you're periodically taking a look at whether you want to continue to close your landfill or continue to operate. So what we're showing here in these circles is a few of the key questions. But there's some small print there which you probably can't read, and this is actually a really important point I hope that you go away with from this presentation. And basically what it's saying is that waste disposal or your landfill solution shouldn't be considered in isolation. It sits within a broader waste management and resource recovery system, and it needs to sit within your strategy. So while it's kind of fascinating to zero in on what do you do with your landfill, you need to make sure that's done in a strategic sense, not just on an operational, purely a cost basis. But if we go back to those circles for a moment, the sort of things that we want to be thinking about when we are considering what our future state might look like is what sort of provision have we made for foreclosure and aftercare. In a lot of cases, that provision for closure and aftercare is almost an operational cost, and that becomes problematic as soon as you close. Makes life pretty difficult. And I guess associated with that, it'll be really important to actually have those costs really well understood. Often they're not very well understood. What are the options on the table if your site isn't operating? So do you have sites close by? Are you going to need to create some particularly complex transfer infrastructure to actually manage transport costs, those sorts of things? There's a decision implicit in closing your landfill around ceding control of a pretty significant part of the waste stream. So that's important in its own right. But it's also kind of important because by having control of disposal infrastructure, you get some really good information around the flow of materials within your area. If you no longer control your disposal site, potentially you lose a whole lot of intel that enables you to be effectively managing that overarching waste and resource recovery system. So again, your landfill sits within a much, much broader waste management system. So linking your facility to waste strategy. When you're thinking about the role of your disposal facility, I'm anticipating that your primary target in operating a waste and resource recovery system within your local government area is to actually reduce waste. And that's everywhere from convincing people to be less wasteful through to capturing materials for recovery, and then your disposal site becomes the home for materials that don't have anywhere else to go. So if you're successfully reducing waste and you're operating a small site, that could actually create quite an interesting challenge for the viability of your site. For a larger facility, typically in a more urban area, that's going to be less of an issue. So the other thing that's worth considering is that often your disposal site and the revenue associated with it will be a significant part of your funding model. And in a New Zealand context where the sites that we are often working with are relatively major sites, the concept of closure means that other forms of revenue, significant forms of revenue, need to be identified for local authorities, and that creates some pretty interesting conversations between the waste department and the financial departments within councils that we've been party to. So it's important to look at the raw dollars and cents. We've talked about the risks there in terms of reputational and so on, but one that can be missed is the role of having a disposal facility in the context of resilience. So what I'm talking about here is major natural disasters where we create a whole lot of additional waste that we need to manage in some way. So if you're in a situation where you no longer have a disposal facility, then potentially when you have a major event occur, you don't actually have anywhere where you can handle a major surge of materials. And in our experience, that's really important to daylight and actively plan for whether you continue to operate your site or not. So what is important to consider is that a disposal facility is in a sense a business. It needs to be viable, and that means you need to understand what your customers are looking for. So that might be your residents, but it's likely to also be small businesses. Depending on the scale of your site, that may also be larger businesses, major waste transporters and those sorts of things. So you need to move from providing a service that is easy to use to providing a service that is competitive. So that implies that you have a really good understanding of what is important to your customers. So it's a pretty good bet that price is going to be pretty important, but what I think is also really important to understand is logistics, the ease of access on and off the site, how rapidly you turn vehicles around, all those sorts of things are also pretty critical. So I can think of a site that we've been involved with where we had the access that was in place for a while was actually damaging collection vehicles. So we had waste contractors actually, in terms of their commercial collections, configuring their collection round so they could avoid actually going to that site. Not because there was a particular price differential, but because they just didn't like the hassle of going there. So that was about not just driving things from price, but actually driving things from quality of service, which is pretty easy to forget about when you're running what feels like a dirty site often. It's pretty important to understand whole-of-life costs, and it's something that we spend a lot of time on, is actually understanding the full development costs and aftercare costs, final closure, all of those different components, and then reflecting that back into a viable gate rate. And I guess often in our experience, some of those costs can end up being hidden or hard to articulate within council budget. So understanding that enables you to set your gate rate in a way that not only funds immediate costs, but funds your future costs as well. And obviously, if you are competing with others, you need to be thinking about what is the service that they're offering, what are the gate rates and those sorts of things. Why might our site actually be something that's worth using as opposed to others? And the key thing here, or one thing that's worth considering if you are in this decision-making process, is actually talking to your customers. What is it that they see as important? Is it simply price? Are there other components that they see as valuable, or other components of your service that they would like to see improved? So as I said, we spend a lot of time working with facility owners to understand those whole-of-life costs. So this involves treating landfill as a strategic asset with associated long-term planning for things like cell development and filling, understanding your leachate management strategy, landfill gas management, capping and aftercare. So understanding, having a master plan and then being able to cost that accurately and actually feed that back into your gate rates is absolutely critical. Ongoing costs such as environmental monitoring, maintenance of supporting infrastructure can be missed and easily be underestimated as well. And obviously, we need to be thinking about escalating compliance requirements, which I'm guessing a lot of you are acutely aware of. So for my money, your gate rate needs to have a contingency for the stuff that we could expect might turn up, but we actually have no idea quite what it looks like. Just to make sure that you don't find that you haven't actually accounted for all of those costs and you end up having to find money from elsewhere for things like closure and aftercare. So I just want to talk about a couple of examples of how we've kind of worked through this process with actually quite different outcomes. So the first example, local government, they ultimately decided to opt out of continuing to operate a landfill in the area. There are a few factors that enabled them to negotiate a really good deal with the private sector for disposal of that materials, and that was a really critical part of their decision-making process, was how do we provide something that's cost-effective. But the interesting thing for me about this local government was because they no longer had a revenue stream effectively from waste being disposed of to their landfill, every tonne of material that they diverted from landfill was a bonus for them. So all of a sudden, the inherent incentives for that local government were quite different to what they had been previously. But a couple of things to note. I think they were in the process, they'd completed a large site, they were in the process of closure, they'd started to develop another major site, so they were going to be a credible competitor within their marketplace. That meant that when they started to talk to the private sector, they got some pretty attractive offers compared to what the same competitors had offered to others. They had made very careful provision for closure and aftercare for their existing site. There was no question about needing to try and pull out some additional revenue to fund that, so that was already pre-funded. They had and they took the time to complete some detailed analysis around the two different options. They'd actually made a start on developing their new site. An offer was put on the table. They took the time to do quite a detailed business case exercise. So obviously they looked at financial impacts. They looked at commercial risk, they took a carbon view, what are the ultimate emissions that they're creating with the different options on the table. They looked at the different compliance components and actually came to the conclusion that putting that compliance into someone else's responsibility probably wasn't entirely unappetising, put it that way. And they linked that back to their waste strategy, which is very much with a circular economy focus. They also considered resilience. And in their context, they were able to continue to use their closed site and a couple of their other facilities to manage that sort of risk. So ultimately, once they'd been through that process, they decided that the right solution was for them to opt out. Interestingly, they've still got that development of their own site sitting in their back pocket, which creates some quite healthy tension in the marketplace. So the second scenario, ultimately this local government decided to continue operations. So as I say, it kind of depends. So in the context of this organisation, they did some detailed interrogation of their operational and construction costs, and that fed into a whole-of-life cost model. So they had some questions around the way that they were charging their gate rate, and they did some work to understand that in more detail. In their context, they did some very careful benchmarking of how the rest of the market operated, so where did they sit price-wise, and also broader quality of service-wise with others in the marketplace. They did understand what their customers were after. They understood why loads were coming to their site when there were competing sites conceivably in a similar area, and they were able to really leverage that hard and continue to do so. They did think about what else was coming into the marketplace in terms of alternatives to landfill or pre-processing, which is pretty critical, and that was part of their decision-making process. So that's put them in a place where they've actually got a really good model to understand what is financially sustainable, viable, or even provides a commercial return to council, and provides them with a framework to continue to evaluate that, because this is never a decision at a point in time that stands forever. It's about having the right information at your fingertips to be able to evaluate that periodically. I guess just a final few points. I guess there is often no perfect solution. And I wonder, perhaps rather than looking for the perfect option, we should be looking for the least worst approach. So running your own site creates a whole lot of challenges and a whole lot of work. But stitching up with another provider actually creates some different challenges. So it's really around choosing which challenges you'd like to have rather than eliminating everything. The reality is that the decision-making draws on a tangled web of interrelated factors. So it's actually not simple. And it's worth actually taking the time to do some detailed analysis, understand whole-of-life cost, understand risk, and do a really careful, considered decision-making process. I guess it's really important to note that scale it obviously is important, particularly if you've got access to other sites close by. I mean, our rule of thumb is if you're 100,000 tonnes and you're in a competitive market, you're probably going to struggle to compete effectively with other players in that same market. But we've certainly got plenty of remote sites where that's just not a factor here. And as I said, I think there's real value in actually, if you are operating a site and establishing a framework to periodically evaluate what the right way forward is. This is not a decision that you make once and just stick with. It's about having a really good understanding and then looking at what the market is doing. Circumstances change, whether that's around compliance, other players in the market, new technologies and so on. But I guess the lesson from that first case study is that actually having a viable option of your own in your back pocket gives you some negotiating power. So retaining those types of things are really, really important. And in terms of that re-evaluation process, taking advantage of logical steps or stages where you might re-evaluate, you'll be periodically developing new cells, those sorts of things. So you dust off your framework, have another look. So I think I've got a slide just to make sure that I don't forget to acknowledge Kimberly and Caroline, who've contributed to a lot of thinking in this, and all that remains to me is to say thank you for the opportunity.
We've got time for a couple of questions, if there's any from the audience, before we move on to the next presentation. I'll come up with one. So, Chris, what's the first and the smallest step councils can do when they're thinking of starting to think about some of these things? You know, not everyone's got a large budget to deal with all these strategic things in one big go. So what would the first little bite be for someone who's starting to think about this kind of stuff?
I guess the gap that we see often is a lack of understanding of the whole of life costs. So actually going through an exercise of understanding, particularly aftercare, doing a bit of forecasting around compliance costs, those sorts of things. And that can be done at quite a high level, but I think I can think of multiple scenarios where that's not well understood. Or we'll have a conversation around provision for aftercare and there'll be a comment along the lines of, I think it's in the budget line over there somewhere. So actually interrogating that to give you the ability to understand whether your current pricing is actually covering all of the costs that you're actually up for, and that's pretty important to understand.
Thanks, Chris. Let's give him a hand as he... if anyone has any questions that come to mind as it's going on, we'll also have some time at the end for a few extra questions. So feel free to save them up. Next up, we have Karen Rudkin from North East Waste, which is a group of councils in the northeast of New South Wales, and she'll be presenting on circular C&D, driving innovation in the Northern Rivers. So let's put our hands together for Karen. Thank you.
Hi everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? If you can't, let me know because I do tend to go a bit quiet. As Tim said, I'm presenting to you today on our Northern Rivers Circular C&D project. Just to give you a little bit of background and context on where we are. So we're in the Northern Rivers, so basically far north New South Wales from the Queensland border essentially down to Grafton, Clarence, that mid-north coast, and across to Kyogle. So we've got 7 member councils within the group, and we've been working for, I think, probably over 20 years now on to achieve local and regional-based solutions for waste management, a better waste management, and progressing towards a more circular economy. Tim, this computer here is not actually showing anything. I wonder if you can make it. Struggling to see that one over there. Yeah. So just for a little bit of context, I guess, so the large quantity of C&D waste that clearly ends up in our landfills across, well, our region, I'm sure most regions across New South Wales, was certainly a catalyst for this project. But there were also a number of other things which happened over the last few years, which were significant factors in our looking more deeply into this, what was probably quite a neglected area, really, of C&D waste. So with those factors included a really large building boom on the north coast of New South Wales, particularly along our coastal strip. The building supply, materials and building supply shortages that occurred, particularly after COVID, but probably most importantly, the devastating floods that happened in 2022, February, March 22, which resulted in massive devastation and loss of housing across our region, particularly in Lismore and also through Ballina and the Byron Shire as well. So they were the real incentives. So we began our investigations with a small pilot project which was funded through the EPA's bin trim program, where we basically wanted to identify and investigate what kind of quantities and the type of C&D materials that were being produced from local industry, business, the building industry. It also helped us to be able to partner, I guess, with those builders that were purchasing, using and disposing of those materials in our region. So just a little summary of the kind of findings we got. So depending on whether it was a construction or a demolition job or a combination of both, we estimated that around 60 to 90% of the materials were potentially recoverable. But of course, the rate of recovery was much, much lower than that due to a number of factors. So primary factors, that one's too far away and that one is kind of too close. So, I'll try not to look up there though. So the main factors being okay, I'm going to refer to this instead. The lack of on-site management. Oh, it just got bigger, that's good. On-site separation. I don't think I even did anything. The lack of on-site separation, which occurs mainly due to lack of space, but other constraints such as multiple contractors on sites, but also lack of training and awareness, etc., on those sites. So contamination in the C&D material was predominantly soil. Often the material is just thrown onto the ground until it ends up in a skip sometime later on the site. And of plastic, soft plastic was a significant contamination in concrete in particular. So a lack of local resource recovery services and or end markets for the materials, major issue. And on top of all that, of course, cost effectiveness. So all of those things combined together result in landfill being a cheaper option than recovery of those materials. So the outcome really of that pilot project was that we were able to develop a number of activities which became the framework for our local government waste solution grant, which is what this project is about. So the Northern Rivers Circular C&D project was born out of that. So these were the activities that we came up with. So establishing gyprock recycling was one of those. Conducting a waste transfer station audit so that we could assess the suitable design and changes to improve the C&D recovery. Working with our tip shop operators to improve the throughput of materials through their shops and keep it out of the landfill, as well as collaboration with commercial waste contractors and builders to facilitate improved separation and recovery, and of course working with industry as well to improve awareness of better waste management practices. So I was just going to run through some of the achievements so far. So I'm glad to say that we did actually we got the funding. And we kicked off in July last year. Basically some of the things that we've either achieved so far or we're in the process of achieving is certainly that the opener to that was some great opportunities to actually communicate and partner with the industry. So the Master Builders Association had us along to a couple of their information nights, which were very well attended by builders across our region. So it gave us the opportunity to be able to share the results of the pilot project with them, and of course discuss issues that affected them, what they thought of what we were planning through the project. We also worked closely with Byron Shire Council, who have installed gyprok recycling at their Byron Myocum site, resource recovery site. It's the only gyprok recycling that's occurring at the moment within our region. And lots of builders have said that, that it's something that they would work towards using if that facility was available. So currently it goes to Regep, which is they're a part of the Pacific Fertiliser Group up in southeast Queensland. So it is actually being recycled into agricultural products, and I believe also back into some plasterboard materials as well, which is a great outcome. And a bit of a no-brainer really, I suppose, in that sense. So during parts of the construction process, it's practically the only thing that is the only waste that's on sites. So if a skip can be placed there at that time, or it can be segregated, it's pretty easy to actually be able to recycle that material. And the rate, it was kind of a bit mind-blowing to me when I went onto sites and saw that so much brand new material, it was offcuts from, and they can't use them. So, immediately it's a waste, and it's so completely recyclable and reusable. And not only that, but the industry says that as in the Pacific Fertilisers say that it's actually as good, if not better, than the stuff that they pull out of the ground. So there's no reason why we should be mining it when we can be recycling and using it. So tip shop, so that's just shows you our tip shop, some of our tip shop operators there who've benefited from some racking to be able to perhaps tidy up some of the existing, way that they store things on their site and display things on their sites. So the benefit to that, of course, is that not only does it look better and is it easier for customers to be able to access and they're more likely to purchase, so of course the flow through of materials is much quicker. So it's particularly useful obviously for fixtures and fittings like doors and windows, but also for timber as well, and probably also helps to improve the health and safety of the workplace as well, to be able to put things into proper racking in that way. So another large and significant part of this project has been actually looking at what's going on at our waste transfer stations. So Ballina Shire Council have been fabulous in supporting us in this part of the program. So essentially what we wanted to do was to go into a waste transfer station. I don't know where, if anywhere, if anyone in the room knows where this has been done. We don't believe it's been sort of carried out in many places, if any. So it's pretty cutting edge, I suppose, in that sense. So the idea was that we could quantify what was going through the waste transfer station as mixed C&D waste on any given day. So we spent one full day there and basically assessed that at a volume level. We weren't able to really do it as a tonnage, only a complete tonnage, but after sorting it into the different categories, we did it by volume. So not only did we assess the composition of the waste stream and the quantity by volume, but we also looked at the way it was operating on the day. So what made it easy for people to do that, to separate there, and what made it difficult. But also what we might be able to do to improve it, both design-wise and procedure-wise. But we also, importantly, spoke to people who turned up on the day. So all of the builders that came through, or almost all of them, I think a few might have politely declined to do it, but most of them did the survey. So we carried out an interview with them to basically find out what the barriers were. First of all, primarily to source separation, and whether or not there might be any chance of them separating at this point if they weren't going to do it at the source. So that slide obviously shows the outcome of the survey. So the materials were sorted basically into 11 categories, and then we subdivided the categories into subcategories. So for instance, timber, we had treated timber, untreated timber, and pallets, for instance. Sheeting, we had all kinds of sheeting, roof sheeting, wall sheeting, floor sheeting, flooring, and of all different materials. within that one category, but then, as I say, them subdivided into those different areas. So without going through it all, basically, we had about 52 cubic metres of C&D waste in that one day at that one site. So I worked out, if I got my maths right, that over a year that would basically extrapolate to around 19,000 cubic metres of C&D waste. And that's from that one site alone. Pretty significant quantity. So on the breakdown, well, it's pretty obvious that timber was the main component within that C&D waste stream. And as it turns out, the treated and untreated timber, not always that easy to assess, but we had some experts on the day who did a pretty good job, was approximately 50-50, interestingly. So, and then, as you can see there, the other categories were significantly less. With sheeting, that sheeting category, of which gyprock, of course, was a component, was around the 21%. And then recoverables, and we included cardboard, expanded polystyrene, and soft plastic in that. E-waste in that category was the next largest area, followed by metals, and everything else was basically between 4 and 0% by volume. So they're just a few nice images from the day of the one on the left is the timber separated. And so we had 10 cubic metre bins, skips, and we basically put them into those and kept them separate if we could, had more than one. Like on the middle photograph there, we've got both gyprock and metal. The top right is a whole heap of untreated timber that came through. That actually went across to the green waste pile, so we didn't have that in the skip with the other timber. And the bottom right is the EPS and the cardboard that was collected. So they're all end of audit photographs. And the one in the middle is just basically showing a typical load that went through on that day. As is the next slide, which is, they all kind of look a bit similar when I look at them now, but I suppose they were to a point. But we tried to keep them separate as they came in so that we could assess them a little bit easier and separate them easier into the skips. So a really interesting part of this audit on the day was doing those feedback surveys with the customers. And one of the main questions, or the primary question, I guess, there was what were the barriers to separating C&D at source for recycling. And I guess we were fairly surprised, maybe we shouldn't have been, but we were fairly surprised by the responses in the end, which were predominantly that they wouldn't be incentivised by a reduction in cost, which we'd sort of expected that they would be. But for a number of reasons they weren't, primarily I think because they've already costed in disposal into the job to start with. And of course to them separating is time and that's money. So, but other reasons as well were, a primary one was that the difficulty of knowing what to do, so of having a lot of composite, hard to recycle or recover materials, which is totally true. A lot of them are hard to recover. But some are not, like metal and gyprock, for instance. So, and some clean, uncontaminated timber as well could easily be recovered or recycled. So, yeah, that was really very interesting research. So, out of that audit, we obviously presented a report and recommendations to Ballina Council, who have been legends in this. I'm sure someone from Ballina is in the room. I can't see them now, but who've been legends in working with us on this project. And really, it's been really motivating, I think, for us to be able to work with, council who wants to really push it. All of our councils do, but in this case, this is just a really interesting project, I guess, in an area where we feel like there can be some real change. So some of the things that have happened so far, or in the process of happening, is they've got a supervisor working pretty much full-time up at the builder's pile, which is a very excellent start, of course, to communicate with people, get messages across, and to try and see if separating, not at source, but separating at that point before it ends up as landfill is going to work, as well as source separation, of course. We want that to happen. But we can have a lot more, control over it happening at this end of the process. So radio communication between the builder's pile and the weighbridge has been an important factor. So when customers are prepared to do a separation at that point, they can benefit from the recovery of some costs. Installation of a skip for the separation of metals and also for the separation of timber, for drink containers, for e-waste are going into that area as part of the trial, as well as a trailer for salvageable materials. So the tip shop's run by a social enterprise, but of course they're fairly limited in their resources, so being able to pull things out there and then that are easily salvageable and sellable through the shop is a real bonus. And council is also intending to implement a charge, a reduced gate fee for items that are salvaged at that point as of July 24. Another really important and exciting part of this is the hire of an excavator to actually see what kind of quantities can be pulled from the pile that can't be done sort of manually at that point. So things are just starting to kick off, and I believe, if Steve's in the room, he can tell me if I'm wrong, there he is, that I think within the first day, something like a 10 cubic metre skip of metal, scrap metal, was pulled out. Is that right? Okay. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. So it's working already. So and hopefully introduction of a gyprock recycling will happen sometime very soon. So I've only got 5 minutes left, so I'll have to rush through. But I mean, I think it's important to say that it's working together with our councils and with other partners has been a real, a very positive process. So as well as helping, working with councils on the design and redesign of their waste transfer stations moving forward, and helping to help solve those problems. We've also worked with other partners as well, such as another Illawarra Shellhaven Regional Waste Group. We're also working on a local government waste solution program for wood waste, which is very interesting, and so we were watching that closely. And we're also working with, are about to start working with one of our local builders who wants to start site separation. So we're going to be working with them on setting up the bins and the signage, measuring and monitoring, and hopefully producing a case study and other resources which can be shared with other builders and to engage them on doing similar practices across our region. So just another shout out there to councils. We've got three at the moment. We have, and have for some time, had three different groups of council, three different tiers of council, if you like, working. A waste managers group, a waste educators group, and a waste operators group. And all of them now, I think, are beginning to have C&D and this issue of C&D recovery on the agenda at most of the meetings. So I think that's a huge tick for collaboration across our region. And I thought, after listening to one of the keynote speakers this morning about repair and reuse, I was glad that I put this slide in. So we've also developed a reuse and repair trail, which is a way for businesses who are salvaging materials as well as repairing them and reusing them to actually put themselves on and manage their own information on the internet, all in one place, a hub where customers can then go to find all of that material. We've got all our tip shops on there. And I think at the moment there are about 55 businesses, but it's a work in progress. It's got a lot of information about circularity, circular economy, and events and workshops that are going on in the region as well, and that will just grow with time. So what we didn't know when we started, quite a bit it turns out. So what have we learned, in other words? Quite a lot of stuff. So we investigated source separation both with industry on site and also at our council sites, but it was, incentivising recovery was a lot more difficult than we thought. Through on-site separations, problematic, as I've already sort of talked about. Separation at our facilities requires more design and change than we'd anticipated at the start. To incentivise other councils within our region, we feel that we really need to have more data and a clear business case, and to be able to quantify what our regional feedstocks are. So there's a whole lot more work to do yet, for sure. And that without a strong market analysis, we lack a better recovery solution than our tip shops, which are fantastic, but they're not enough to be able to handle all of the C&D materials that are coming through currently. So we need other options. But on the upside, the positives, we've now got a much clearer idea of the scale of materials entering our facilities and the limited capacity of our councils to be able to deal with some of those volumes. And our participating councils have been fabulous, and it's it's into adapting to all of these changes, and I think that things are going to. Feels like we've moved to a new level, I guess, if you like, in regional collaboration and looking at these hard to recycle materials and where we might go with this next. So it's pretty exciting to be part of that process. And North East Waste, well, we've learned a fair bit ourselves about C&D waste at this point and the changes that are going to be required for us to be able to progress towards a circular economy and recovery of so much of that material. So where are we going next? Well, a lot of work to do. So we're looking for local, regional and neighbouring recovery options that are suitable to adapt or extend across the rest of our region. We'd like to use the networks that we've got and that we're developing to bring stakeholders together, stakeholders who have waste and stakeholders who want waste, and to develop a business case that looks at the cost benefit of the returns against the levy, with the costs of expanding the recovery of targeted materials. And also developing a better practice guide and procedures and a case study to help expand that across our region to our other facilities and councils. But last and not least, of course, is to provide the building sector with real incentives to separate at source and to operate better waste management practices on their sites, and to make sure that we keep them engaged with what's going on and the emerging opportunities within our region. So that's it from me, really. Thank you for listening. And if there's anyone out there who is doing a similar project or who has waste, who wants waste, not who has it, we don't want your waste, but if you'd like our waste, we'd love to talk. So particularly if you're thinking that you may want to start some operations in the Northern Rivers. We're very close to southeast Queensland. So anyway, myself and Jeannie McKillop, who's the North East Waste Coordinator, we're both here and is just in the front row here. We'll be here for the duration of the conference. So if anyone wants to come and chat with us, that would be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. We'll save any questions for Karen at the end. I'm sure there's plenty because C&D is such a big waste stream for all of our council. So up next, we've got Katrina Nelson, Business Development Manager at LGI Limited. So Katrina is going to be presenting on battery storage. So batteries are a topical issue with landfill-generated renewable energy. So, Katrina, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Can I just, first of all, thank really fantastic. Nothing fills me with more joy than when I see something reused. Little side note, I'm renovating at the moment. I had the best reuse story. I literally had my floorboards taken off a deck, put them on Marketplace. They were picked up by someone who was building a new deck and they were gone within 6 hours. So that's sort of right at the source. But if that can be happening at other centres, how fantastic. So thank you. I'm really grateful to be here. I love this conference because it fills me with, it's just great being surrounded by people who are seeking to implement solutions, and there's a whole lot of solutions, so I think it's wonderful. And how gorgeous is Coffs Harbour? So I'm going to be talking about batteries. I just wanted to touch on, I think the themes Costa flagged this morning around innovate and care and maintain. There's a real thread of that through what I want to sort of talk to you about today. Now let me just see if I've got the right button. Yeah, so I'm from LGI, Landfill Gas Industries, and I'm here to talk to you about landfill gas extraction. And sort of as a bit of a metaphor, I suppose, I think about it, it's a little like Rick Astley. Extracting landfill gas is proven, it's been around for decades, but it's finding a new audience. So it's having a bit of a revival. And if any of you either have kids who play Fortnite or play Fortnite yourself, you'll know all about emotes and things. Rick Astley's had a complete, I guess, resurgence through Fortnite, and I think landfill gas is a similar kind of thing. It effectively, we're dealing with a legacy issue, probably really important to note. Our business is not at all advocating for more waste to landfill. We're advocating for less waste to landfill, more reuse, all of those great things. But we acknowledge that there's a legacy issue that exists with the waste that's in the ground and the waste that will continue to be put into landfills for decades to come. So we're all about addressing that existing issue. So there's sort of the new need of this climate change. There's an increased awareness that we need to address climate change. And part of that is in the energy sector, and in the energy sector having firm, reliable renewables is really important. And the really unique thing about energy from landfill gas is that it's renewable, but it's also dispatchable. So unlike beautiful wind and solar, which is great, but isn't always available, landfill gas can be pretty much always available. And it's also on the distribution network, which is super important because that's closer to where we live, where businesses are, where the EVs are. So it puts projects like ours in a position to be able to really deliver a solution when and where it's needed. So, yeah, I think I've covered most of that. This is an overview of what we do. We capture the landfill gas, we put it through a flare or a power station. We're now adding batteries to that solution, and we're providing, so there's carbon abatement through the methane combustion, and there's also renewable dispatchable electricity going either into the grid or into the grid and behind the meter. Much of this has been covered. There are thousands of landfills in Australia, some of them are registered. The majority of them are in the metropolitan areas and do have landfill gas extraction and have done for decades. So this stuff's proven. It's not high risk or, you know, there aren't concerns about sort of being on the bleeding edge or of technology. However, the majority of the landfills by number are managed by LGAs, and lots of them are in the regional areas. And on one hand, it's sort of a crying shame that a lot of the regional areas still don't have the benefit of capturing this landfill gas. On the flip side, there's a proven solution available, and there's a lot of really sort of existing great things that can be done with that gas. So if there's anyone in the room who isn't aware, really quick Biogas 101, landfills produce landfill gas. That's 50% methane, CO2, 50% CO2 roughly. It can be, by capturing that gas by putting a series of pipes into the landfill, horizontal pipes and verticals, putting that under vacuum and then bringing it through to either a flare or on a larger site, a power station, we combust that gas, so we burn it. By burning it, the methane, which is a very harmful greenhouse gas, is converted into CO2 and water, and that will reduce that greenhouse gas impact by about 96%. So there's methane's 28 times more harmful as a greenhouse gas than CO2. So in terms of making an impact, addressing methane emissions as soon as possible is a really important thing for us to do. And as a rule of thumb, a council's carbon footprint, 60 to 80% of it will come from their landfill if they don't have active gas extraction systems in place. So if your council has a climate strategy or not and is seeking to reduce emissions, in terms of low-hanging fruit, the easiest place to start is with a proven solution by getting gas extraction in the landfill. Do a little bit about LGI. We're established in 2009 in Brisbane. We're Australian operated, we're ASX listed, and we have sites in New South Wales, Queensland and the ACT. We operate on 27 landfill sites. The majority of those are local government. A lot of those are in regional areas. Most of those are open sites, so we are working hand in hand with the landfill operations teams to complement what they're doing. One of them, interestingly, is a closed site, Willawong in Brisbane. It stopped taking waste on a regular basis almost a quarter of a century ago. It's still producing enough methane that we have a power station on it. So I guess it's sort of just an example of landfill gas. If we closed every landfill tomorrow, and wouldn't it be wonderful if that could occur? It won't occur tomorrow. There'll be gas in the system for decades. So being able to capture it and manage it, and even better, make some beneficial use of it is really, really important. The other thing, I guess, just quickly about LGI is we have a fully integrated system. So we design the systems, we build them, we install them, we operate them, we maintain them, we manage the carbon credits, we manage the renewable energy, and in the majority of cases, most of our contracts are structured so that it's a no-cost solution to the landfill owner. The landfill owner don't have to do much, and we provide them with a share of what we are earning. So here's our footprint. Landfill gas is playing a really important role now in the energy transition. So we have the carbon abatement piece, and that occurs whether it's a flaring project or a renewable energy project. In the regions, on regional landfills, a lot of them will be flaring projects, and they are still fantastic because of that carbon abatement reduction. But there's also the dispatchable renewable energy piece. These engines can sort of respond within 5 minutes, where intermittent renewables don't have that same aspect, and sort of the retiring coal stations certainly can't operate within a 5-minute window. That's just gone off. And now batteries. We are adding batteries adjacent to our power stations, which just adds another layer of service that we can put into the energy transition to help. Batteries are getting a lot, and it'll be, this is going to increase a lot more, I guess, emphasis and importance. There's a lot more discussion around it in Queensland. There's now an incentive program for household batteries to be put in place. You may have heard of Elon Musk's, Tesla big battery in South Australia. There are now a whole range of large transmission scale batteries being put in place. And that's really important because they are matching the intermittent renewables. So the wind and the solar that's coming in as the coal stations are retiring, there's no single solution, but a big part of the solution is going to be batteries that quite simply shift the energy from when not everybody needs it in the middle of the day, on a sunny day, when everyone's solar panels are pumping. Power prices can sometimes be negative. It could actually cost money for generators to generate electricity. So what the batteries do is they capture that energy, and then at the end of the day, when everyone's home cooking and turning on their air conditioners, that energy can be pumped back into the grid. That's one of the roles the batteries play. The other roles they play are providing grid firming services, or FCAS, Frequency Control Ancillary Services is an acronym for it. And that essentially keeps the grid reliable and smooth. So batteries can shift the load. They can also provide grid firming services. And coupled with a landfill gas generation engine, they can also enable us to optimise the use of the gas and the use of the engine. So even though the engines are great at turning on and off compared to, say, a coal station, no engine likes being turned on and off all the time. So, and equally, we are on site to capture the landfill gas for carbon abatement and air quality reasons primarily. We need to do that every day. But the combination of the engine, the battery and the landfill means that we can vary when we're drawing on the landfill the hardest and when we are operating the engine, and use that battery between the grid and a generator to provide another layer. So in terms of innovation, the battery is an example of how LGI is innovating on a humble old landfill gas extraction system, which at the outset I sort of explained, it's proven this isn't new, it's been happening for decades. There are hundreds of projects like these around the country. What we're doing, I guess, is just adding adding a layer of innovation to that. So what we have on the screen up here is an illustration of the way we operate the system. We have the NEM, which is the National Electricity Market, our power generator, the battery, and then we've got what we've called our DAX, our Dynamic Asset Control System, which is essentially a really clever computer system that our engineers have designed. It takes data from the market, it takes weather data, it takes data from the landfill, it looks at what's happening with pricing, and it looks at our operation schedule. It combines all of those things and can make decisions faster than a human being can make. We still have human intervention available if and when it's wanted, but certainly these batteries in the FCAS markets, they have to operate they provide services in seconds, and so having this DAC system enables us to be able to respond when the market needs it, which is either in seconds for those frequency control services or within the 5-minute pricing periods that the electricity market operate within. So I'm going to take you through 2 case studies quickly, very quickly, so I don't go over time. This was our first project. This is at Bunya, which is one of the City of Moreton Bay's landfills sites that we operate on. We operate on 3 of their sites. All of them started as flaring sites, transitioned to power generation sites, and this one is our first battery site. So batteries have been in the system for some years now. This is not sort of bleeding edge technology, but nonetheless connecting them to the grid is really new. So the grid operators are really running at the moment, trying to keep up with the regulatory change and the technical standards changes that they need in order to be able to get this new technology onto the system. So we bought a Tesla Megapack. We bought it for this site where we had an existing connection agreement. We bought it prior to having the connection agreement signed off because we knew that this was new and it would take a little bit of sort of time to work through. We affectionately refer to it as the doorstop in our office for a while, in our workshop for a while, because it literally sat there for quite a while as we're working through the network connection. But now it's up and running. It's the next slide. No, I've gone too far. Yeah, so this is a baby. This is our smallest one. It's a 1 megawatt, 2 megawatt hour battery. And now that we've put this one in place, we are working towards opportunities across our fleet where we can put these batteries in. So this one was done in collaboration with Energy Queensland. This next one is at Mugger Lane in the ACT. It's an open landfill. It's the ACT's largest. It is the ACT's landfill site or waste management centre. When we commenced on that site, it was a 4 megawatt site. We've upgraded the infrastructure. So this was a brownfield site. It already had a gas extraction system. So the site, since we've been operating, has had 4 new generators put on there. We're in the process at the moment of upgrading it with another 2. And we've negotiated with Evo Energy, which is the grid operator in the ACT, to expand the grid connection to 20 megawatts, and we're going to put 12 megawatts of battery storage on that site. Interestingly, it was a much faster process getting the grid connection in the ACT, but all of the network operators are getting faster at this technology. This is the clean energy regulator later on site, having a bit of a look at what we're doing. I'll be very quick. So we have a stall at booth 57 near the coffee, so I'm conscious of time. If you have any other questions, and there's so much more I could sort of describe about these projects, please come and see us. I'm here with Mick Fullylove, Leanne Edmonds and Tom O'Connor, who I think might be in the room. They're wearing green LGI shirts, so please come and speak to us. So I guess in conclusion, what I'd like to leave you with, I suppose, is that the humble old landfill, which will be in our waste management system for some time, managing the legacy gas emissions is really important and really doable. We can simply abate carbon emissions and improve local air quality, which is really important. But on larger sites, and they don't have to be that large, there's an opportunity, a really exciting opportunity for renewable energy and batteries to be added into the system. The ACCUs, or the Australian carbon credits, and the renewable energy enable companies like ours to provide councils with a system which is at no cost. So it's not a cost issue for councils that have not done this before. It's a going through the procurement process issue, which I acknowledge is challenging, but the rewards are really, really amazing. And there's a lot of councils that we could put you in contact with who have already doing this and can, I guess, explain how it works and why it's a great thing. So sort of bring it right back to Costa, I suppose. Here, Costa's themes of innovation, we're really sort of passionate about working with more councils to apply innovation to the landfills so that we can get more gas extracted and also expedite the transition to renewables and net zero. There's a lot of new tech coming and that will play part of the solution, but there's a lot of existing solutions that we have right now that we can just get on with. So if anyone's interested to come and have a chat and understand some more, be happy to talk to you. Thanks.
Thanks, Katrina. Do we have Leah Maxwell in the room? Yeah, coming up. So I didn't get to meet beforehand. So our last presenter this afternoon is Leah Maxwell, Executive Officer at the Adelaide Hills Waste Management Authority, and Leah's going to be talking on landfill operators to sustainability drivers. Let's welcome Leah. If you want to stand back and look up.
Thanks everyone, thanks for having me here. Yeah, this stream's been really interesting. I hope everyone else has found it as interesting as I have, and hopefully I'll flow on from what's been discussed and it will all tie in together. So, who are we? So we're the Adelaide Hills Region Waste Management Authority. We're a subsidiary of 4 councils in the Adelaide Hills region: Murray Bridge, Mount Barker, Adelaide Hills and Alexandrina councils. We are governed by a board. We have 1 representative on our board from each of our member councils and an independent chair. And we're also independently staffed. We operate a landfill at Brinkley, which is near Murray Bridge, and I don't know how familiar you are with South Australia, but it's about 40 minutes out of the city. And we also operate resource recovery centres across the region. Sorry, did I say 40? I meant 80 kilometres out of the city. So there's just a map of our region and our member councils. So the metropolitan area is sort of between Adelaide Plains and City of Onkaparinga, and we're sort of out in the region heading towards the Murraylands, as well as Alexandrina and the Fleurieu. We've recently embarked on a new strategic plan, which is heavily focused on the circular economy. Sorry, just grabbing my cheat sheet. We've recognised that driving the transition to the circular economy is a significant opportunity for our subsidiary, and we've worked with our member councils to implement, to draft up our new strategic plan. Our vision, our purpose and our mission: to work together with our member councils to provide cost-effective, progressive and best practice waste and resource management services across our region. Our purpose is to facilitate, coordinate and provide waste and resource management services, including waste collection, treatment, disposal and recycling within our region. And our mission: to provide leadership and management services to deliver best practice waste and resource management solutions for the communities within our region. Our guiding principles: best practice and innovation, environmental sustainability and circular economy, cost effectiveness and financial sustainability, and collaboration and community. So we have 4 key goal areas within our strategic plan. Best practice. So we seek to investigate best practice in our industry and bring that back to the region. So we have 4 councils that are independently don't have the ability to really go out and find that information. So we aim to do that for them and bring it back to them and look into best practice and implement that within our region. Collaboration. Collaboration is key across our member councils and also with our community. And we're really focused on increasing collaboration moving forward. An empowered community, we're implementing a wide-reaching education program and looking to empower our community to make the right choices at the curbside and in their life and how they make their decisions. And good governance. So as a regional subsidiary, we have the same governance structure as local government, or very similar. So we need to ensure that we're complying with the Local Government Act and all the governance that comes with that. So some of our targets. To transition our facilities into circular economy hubs. We have facilities across the region where we already have reuse centres, resource recovery centres, sales shops, and we're recovering waste that's disposed to site, but we're looking at transitioning the language and branding that as circular economy hubs. So it's not just a landfill or a transfer station, it's somewhere that embraces the community coming and bringing their material that has to be disposed to landfill because it doesn't have another option, or bringing it for recovery and recycling. So we try and take an advantage of all of programs that are available for the community to have convenient drop-off locations. We're looking to position ourselves to be an end-to-end subsidiary. So the best way that we can work as a subsidiary is to be able to manage the material from start to finish. As I mentioned, implementing a wide-reaching education program. So we recently established a role within the authority as a circular economy officer. So she's ramping up education across the region, doing things like community workshops, biochar workshops, landfill tours, social media, etc. So where we came from was we were a small subsidiary running a small landfill, and that was pretty much our core focus. So we've really branched out from that, which I'm sure a lot of people in the industry have as well. So we're on the path to circular economy at the moment. So we've set some targets that are quite high targets for our region, and that is to increase diversion at the resource recovery centres by 20%. So we're currently recovering around 70% of the material that comes to our resource recovery centres. So we're looking to increase that to 90%. So of everything that is dropped off, only a small percentage of that material we're aiming to go to landfill. And this is a 10-year strategic plan, so it won't happen overnight. Increasing material recovered from the landfill to 40%. So we're currently recovering around 20% of material that goes to our landfill, and we're looking to basically double that over the 10-year period. We wanted to set our targets high so that it had something for us to achieve and to work towards as a region. It gives us a why. And increased diversion rates across the member council curbside services to 70%. Within SA, that is sort of the target. We're regional, so we don't have a set target, but we're aiming to achieve 70%. They're currently sitting at around 55% diversion. We have a 3-bin system. We have FOGO within townships, and recycling and waste, etc. Some of our councils are looking at fortnightly waste, and most of them are weekly at the moment. So I think to reach that 70%, we'll really need some step changes, and our role is to assist our councils to consider those options, to see how it might work for them, to look at the implications from a community perspective, a waste perspective, financial, environment, and help them reach those decisions to implement those types of changes within the council. So why? We operate a landfill, but we're not just landfill operators. Under our charter, we have functions to improve waste management and recycling practices, to reduce waste to landfill, to develop cooperation across our member councils, and establish education programs. Those things have been in our charter for a long time, but we have focused really on a landfill, and it's time to sort of step up and make sure that we're achieving those goals. We aim to meet the needs of our member councils, and including the elected members and their communities. So we need communication with our member councils on an ongoing basis to see what their needs are and work with them to try and meet those needs. And they have become much more than a cheap, effective and compliant disposal option for waste. That's sort of back of their mind, really, is where the waste goes. They want the community programs, they want the education programs, they want to see that things are happening within the region. So what are we doing? We're engaging with our community, establishing a regional education plan to plan out what kind of education services we'll be providing. Encouraging our community to utilise the curbside services and reduce their contamination of waste. Utilising the resource recovery centres as drop-off areas for difficult waste. So taking advantage of programs and schemes that are in place, looking at how we may be able to use those schemes, what kind of impact that has from a financial perspective, and where we can, putting those in place at our resource recovery centres. So some of the things we do is household chemicals. So where there's grant and funding programs, we take advantage of those. So at one of our sites, we've got a household chemical drop-off facility, which was funded by Green Industries SA. We also have e-waste, batteries, paint, tyres and polystyrene, which was also, the polystyrene machine was partially funded as well. Supporting our member councils to implement FOGO collection and to increase the diversion of waste and for conversion to compost. Effectively managing our resource recovery centres, which collect and transfer materials, including C&D waste, etc. And the picture you'll see there is just supplementing our resource recovery centres with recycling hubs, which are positioned at our libraries. And they recently went in and have been really popular across the community. So we collect that material and then recycle that material through our existing streams at our resource recovery centres. And establishing chemical drop-off. Just move on. So we're continuously seeking to expand the scope of materials that we can collect. And like I said before, looking to partner with the providers that are there to be able to do that. Assisting with disaster waste management. So in the last few years, I don't think we've had a year where we haven't had a disaster, and we've become really important to the region at that time. We've had fires, floods, and one of the fires was actually in the local abattoir. So it was the biggest abattoir in the state, I believe, and it pretty much burnt to the ground. So there was a lot of animal waste that needed to go somewhere. Unfortunately, that became us. But it is when you remember, and no one wants a landfill, really. Councils don't really want a landfill. They want to divert 100% of their waste from landfill. But when something like that happens, the landfill becomes really important. Ooh. So we've also done regional tendering for our member councils, so tendered for their curbside services, and been really successful with the results in that and helping our councils. Polystyrene recycling, so we have a polystyrene melt at our facility where we collect clean polystyrene from residents that drop it off, and then we melt it down into blocks and we're able to transport that for recycling. A salvage shop, so we've got salvage shops at the front of house at our resource recovery centres. Chemical disposal, so that was, on the picture there is our chemical disposal shed. Disaster waste management and curbside bins for Indigenous communities. So some of our challenges, collaboration is key. It's a journey, everyone needs to be on the same path, and it's not easy to keep multiple councils connected. It can't be taken for granted. You can't think you've got everything working and we're all good now. You've just got to continuously work on collaborating. 4 councils, there's not really many councils, but they've all got their own ideas and things that they want to do, and we need to make sure that we continue to work together. Staff need to be multi-skilled and enthusiastic. We're a small regional landfill, resource recovery centres. We've got staff that are, have been in local government for quite some time, so bringing them on the journey as well, teaching them about new things, getting them involved and interested. For example, we were looking at putting in a bio bin at our landfill as a demonstration to show composting on site. And one of our staff said, oh, no one here would be interested in that out at Murray Bridge. No one cares about where their green waste goes. It turns out he's got a property, he composts on site, and he lives locally in the area. So if he cares and he's doing it, why wouldn't the rest of the community? And all of a sudden he's switched on and, really enthusiastic about projects really for the circular economy. So we need to be adaptable and resilient, keeping our strategic vision, but also being ready for new projects. Resource recovery activities are not always cost effective. So I know I've said, we try and accept everything we can. That's obviously within reason, and it's really doing a deep dive into what is the program, how much it's going to cost, what's the funding availability, the benefit for the community. So really looking into each opportunity and then presenting that back to the board and the elected members to get them on board with what we're looking at doing. Now, something I learnt from a local Indigenous person who was actually at another landfill site within South Australia is that when knowledge is shared, it becomes wisdom. And that really sat with me, and it's something that we are embracing. We have knowledge sharing forums across our member councils, so we get everyone together on a quarterly basis to try and keep that connection. And we also have implemented quarterly newsletters that go out to our members and the broader region. So, challenges facing local government. I think Chris touched on it earlier. Meeting the expectations of local government and governance. As a regional subsidiary, we can focus on waste. If you're within a broader council, you're just one element of everything else they're doing, from community projects, libraries, services. So there's not always that real focus on waste and on a landfill. So it can sort of just go into the background. I know when we took on one of our sites many years ago, there was a lot of stockpiles that, they were making money. They've brought in all this material, but it was all sitting there stockpiled with no real plan of what they were going to do with that material down the track. So being a regional subsidiary, we can focus on waste and on waste and resource recovery, but we also have the added governance model that we then need to comply with as well. So I guess there's not an easy answer. Attracting knowledgeable staff, so especially being regional, getting those staff in that have the knowledge and the skills. Long-term planning, budgeting, fee setting, and ensuring liabilities and unknowns are accounted for. So we have a 10-year financial plan that we include all of that information into. But yeah, it's really being aware of that, because if you're a local council in a regional area, it may be likely that you haven't considered your capping and closure costs and all of the liabilities that come with running a landfill. So that needs to be taken into consideration when setting your fees. Helping in disaster waste management while also considering the longer term impacts. I mentioned the animal waste. I had a lovely landfill, never ever smelt a day. One day I went out to site and it stank. So it was the leachate that had been generated after putting animal waste into the landfill. It's gone now, the smell, thankfully, but it hung around for a while, and once something starts smelling, it bothered me. It probably didn't bother anyone else, but yeah, it's not a great feeling. So it's being aware of those unexpected outcomes and keeping up to date with emerging compliance matters. So in the waste industry, everything is always changing. It's probably why we all stick in our jobs, because it makes everything very interesting, but it's also hard sometimes to keep up with all of those changes and be on top of everything that's happening. So I think I've pretty much come to my time, so I'll finish up there. Thank you.
Don't forget your phone. So that's the end of our session on landfills. Do we have any questions from the group for any of our presenters at all? We've got a microphone down the back there. So if you just stand up, if you say where you're from and also who you'd like to address the question to, and I'll pass the mic around down the front. So first one is Giles on the back.
Hello, I'm Giles Perryman from Coffs Waste Management. I've got a question for Karen. Hopefully she's down there still. You were asking if anyone had done anything similar. We did a very similar project about 4 or 5 years ago for mid-waste, where we did a 5-day waste audit at transfer stations for C&D. But I was interested to ask, again, then we highlighted gyprock as a real big potential, and we were doing this in the UK 25 years ago. But since then, and based on the start of the day, have you tested it for PFAS? Because I know it's a fire retardant material.
As an easy answer to that question, no. I guess it's going to REGIP, maybe REGIPA testing. I'd have to look into that, but it hasn't been queried from that angle. So, yeah, it's an interesting question. I don't know if anyone else has got any experience of that, but no.
Hi Giles, it's Jeannie. I think we were more concerned about asbestos when we started and keeping the gyprock stream clean. And I figured it going to a, really well-established recycler, that they would be looking at anything else.
I guess, yes. None of us were really looking at PFAS a few years ago, but yeah. Oh, and if I can have a second one. Do you reckon the introduction of the levy in Queensland has affected things for C&D recycling in northern New South Wales? Because when we did the project, the economics didn't stack up because it was cheaper to take it over the border there, whereas now they've got a levy. Now it should be the tipping balance for stuff to happen in our region.
Well, we are looking at options for recycling it in our region. They may come to fruition, they may not, but currently it definitely goes over there and it is a cheap option for sure. I don't know quite how it stacks up against the cost of landfilling it at the moment. I think at the moment it's being done because we want to move in that direction and we want to encourage businesses, builders to start separating. So it's been done, I guess, partly as as a trial, but also as an exercise in incentivising, I guess, the industry to actually move in that direction. So. Not sure, again, of the answer to that one, but I think if we can do it regionally, then of course we will. So, yeah, I think maybe what's happened with asbestos in compost and the like recently is probably might take a little bit longer for us to be able to successfully have options within our region that might involve it going into a composting, a mulching business process. But yeah, there are other things. So I think things are emerging all the time. So hopefully that's the way it's going to go. But for now, the REGIP option is very cheap. I think there's only something like the only real cost is the transport. So the gate fee is something like $20 a tonne or something. It's really cheap, a really cheap option. So, and it is being aggregated with lots of REGIP from other areas too. It isn't just going direct, it's being aggregated with other material that the waste service provider it's going to is getting from other sources. But I think it goes up to I believe it goes up to Stapleton in Queensland before it goes there. So there's a kind of an aggregated, stepped process for it to get where it's going. But yeah, if we can get a regional option for it, that will be good. Yeah.
Thank you. Is there another question? Yep, just down here. Oh, thanks, Charles.
Yeah, this one's for Chris. So in the Mid-Coast, we operate our own landfills, and we've undertaken a detailed analysis of all the cost drivers and everything that go into it. Part of that's been working with SMEC and others to understand the full cost recovery. One of the big things, I've sort of been in the waste manager's gig there for 2.5 years. One of the things that I've identified in our council is the need for a restricted remediation reserve for landfills if you own one. Is that something that you really, I'm assuming from what you've been talking about, that's something that you'd think would be necessary. If you own a landfill, you really should have restricted remediation reserves that can't be spent on anything else.
Yeah, and in an ideal world, that's being ring-fenced, put aside, so that's there to draw down on. I think the reality of a lot of councils is that's quite hard to achieve. But yeah, and I guess my observation is a lot of councils have kind of assumed that that money will continue to flow and they can fund that remediation activity out of operational revenue, if you like, which falls over a little bit if you stop operating your landfill. So definitely creating reserve by far preferred.
Yeah, and I just had one other, sorry. No, this one's for Katrina. Just regarding landfill gas capture, is there a relative scale that LGI work on for the potential for renewable energy generation? So scale of landfill size, tonnages per year?
Not so much landfill size and scale. I mean, there are some rules of thumb. We sort of talk about at least, or, generally about 10,000 tonnes per annum going in to justify a flaring system. Then once we have a flaring system in place, we look to extract as much as we possibly can, and once we get to a point where we have about 750 cubic metres per hour of flow, that's what we would look to achieve to then go to the next stage of energy generation. Our generators tend to be in 1 megawatt modular systems, and so that 750 sort of feeds a 1 megawatt station, if you like. But it's tricky putting a rule of thumb around a landfill for the generation, just because not only does it depend upon the characteristics of the landfill in terms of how deep and what was actually in it. How you can sort of look and see, sometimes there are records that give you an indication of MSW, but as Karen was discussing earlier, I&C can have an awful lot of organics in it as well from time to time. And the other aspect with a power generation project is the hardest part about a generation project is the grid connection. Most councils, most landfill owners don't have a significantly large electricity demand sitting right next door for a behind-the-meter load. One of our customers, the Toowoomba Regional Council, happened to have their wastewater treatment plant next door, so they're sort of very beautifully positioned and saving themselves hundreds of thousands of dollars a year now in power savings. But in most of our projects, most projects are grid connected. That grid connection cost the grid connection is the most time consuming, and it can be quite an expensive piece. So that the cost of that grid connection can then again impact how much gas you actually need to make the project viable. So sorry, Dave, I can't give you a straight answer.
No, that's okay. And just a real quick one for Karen, just with the C&D stuff. So we've got Resource Recovery Australia operate our sites, do a brilliant job. I'm not just saying that because the New South Wales manager's next to me. But they do a brilliant job. They build in their contract is recovery of C&D and materials for tip shops. They turn over about $1 million through their tip shops, so they do a really good job. One of the issues we come up with is the efficacy of endpoints. So when you have undertaken your C&D analysis, have you looked into the efficacy of where the products are going? Because what we've identified is there's many people within the market who say, we can do X with this product, and then the actual reality is that it's not an appropriate process, and usually a fair chunk of the materials ended up in landfill anyway. So it's just a broken chain sometimes.
Yeah. I guess we haven't got to that point with most of the materials we're looking at. So we've done a fair bit of research into what happens with reject. and that goes to a very well-established company, as in Pacific Fertilisers. We haven't really got I wish we did, but we don't have end markets for our wood waste at this point. But I certainly think it will be part of the process when hopefully that happens, and we'll certainly be querying any company that gets involved in that for us, sure, as to the efficacy of that. I know it's come up with textiles, which is an area. Sorry, solar panels, yeah, for sure. So it's and they're looking for markets and working through what actually happens to those products. So yeah, absolutely. I think before we would be likely to engage in any of that, we'd be looking to make sure that we knew where it was going. So yeah, did that answer the question?
Thanks. Thanks. That's it.
Right, we're going to wrap it up there. So if there's any questions, feel free. Our speakers will be down the front here for another minute or two once it finishes, so feel free to come and grab them or on their way out. So I just want to say big thanks again to Chris, Karen, Katrina and Leah. Let's just put our hands together. Thanks, guys, for some great presentations. So yeah, if you just walk out through the door, we've got a afternoon tea out there. Just listen for the music when the next session starts again, but grab some food, have a good chat, recharge, and we'll see you back in for the afternoon. Thank you.